Stage 1. The Love Bomb. You're greeted like family. Handshakes, smiles, a glossy booklet offered as proof that you belong, while that curtained booth waits, quietly promised for later. The welcome booklet, with its small print details, subtly outlines your future group responsibilities, anchoring an implicit commitment. A practiced welcome
We build
slides over
together,
the room, inclusive
secure the
phrases,
process.
confident certainties,
Trust
each line
the process.
reshaping how you understand belonging. A name tag, stamped with an approved phrase, becomes a small but visible pledge. You're now part of a shared story. A quiet favor in the corridor seeds an unspoken obligation. Gratitude begins to feel like an invisible tether. Communal meals, shared in comforting silence, reinforce belonging, making the group feel like a natural extension of yourself. The
Let the
sharing
circle hold
is
your
framed
truth.
as intimacy,
Share.
a ritual
I
space where naming a small
Stole a
secret
candy bar in
is the
fourth
price
grade.
of membership.
Felt like
When
I didn't
others
belong,
reveal a
you
minor
know?
flaw, the
Just
group
doubt.
rewards it with warmth,
Thank you
teaching
for
that
sharing.
vulnerability is
That takes
social
courage.
currency here. The facilitator's quiet attention turns inward toward you, an expectant silence that nudges you to disclose. You weigh a small, rehearsed admission, a test of how much vulnerability will buy you acceptance.
Understand
Your
now that
confession
I was
lands,
resisting the
and
process.
the room responds.
I see the value in
Approval
sharing
arrives
everything
quickly,
with the group.
teaching you the
I
exchange
apologize
rate
for my
between
previous
honesty and belonging.
non-compliance.
A blank confession transcript, waiting silently on the table, foreshadows the deeper disclosures that will eventually be expected.
Honesty
A validating
is
touch
valued.
from another member folds you further into the group, where physical grace notes mask social leverage. The official
Review
group
the
schedule
schedule.
arrives tidy,
Your cooperation
unquestionable,
during
with
the
confession
confession
times
times is
listed like
essential for the
unavoidable
process.
appointments. Routines
As
are
you can see,
framed as
daily
personal
reflection
growth.
is scheduled for
Frequent
0800,
reflection and
and
structured
confession
practice
times
become the
begin
language of
promptly at
commitment.
1900.
A crisp consent form appears, its signature line the hinge between curiosity and contractual obligation. That blank line is a threshold, a single stroke that will mark your departure from what you once knew. You pause, feeling the tug between the comfort of new belonging and the quiet surrender this ink will represent. A deliberate signature seals the first agreement, small in itself, immense in consequence. Your booklet returns, now personalized and stamped, a manual for behaving within the group's language and logic. A request for a small favor arrives like a test. Compliance here stitches you tighter into the group's obligations. Your updated name tag, with its new symbol, confirms your escalating participation and visible integration into the group. The
Tonight's
facilitator
solo
frames the
reflection
solo
requires
reflection as an
adherence to
essential
approved
practice, your
linguistic
first
frameworks.
exercise in speaking
Process
and
the
thinking
provided
the
prompts
group's words.
internally.
In the reflection chamber, you lift the pen over a pre-printed journal, a private ritual that has quietly become public property.
Welcome to
Stage
Stage
2.
2. We are here to help you realign your
Language
thoughts with the group
capture
consensus.
and thought
Cooperation is
reform.
mandatory.
These
Glossy
are the
pamphlets
approved
of
terms.
approved
Use them
vocabulary
precisely.
are distributed
Deviation
the group's
will
first
not
real
be
tool for
tolerated.
reshaping how you name your world. The vocabulary list pairs forbidden words with exact replacements, translating private thought into published doctrine. The facilitator
Stop.
shows the thought-stopping ritual,
Pause.
a sharp wrist snap paired with a
Think.
three-word stop phrase, taught like a mechanical reflex to interrupt doubt. You receive a personal cue card and rubber band, a tactile device, meant to reprogram hesitation into sanctioned language. A forbidden thought rises, and you snap the band, the sting marks the moment your private phrasing is interrupted and replaced. A peer
Remember the
monitor
phrase list.
intercepts your
Stick
slip
to the
of
approved
language.
lexicon.
The group's grammar becomes a live policing force. The practiced wrist snap becomes a visual motif, an outward sign of inward control. You notice the group's near-synchronized reactions, a disciplined rhythm that keeps dissent from gaining purchase. You sift your private phrasing through the group's lexicon, feeling your natural language grind into the approved vocabulary. A
Let's
gentle
aim for
admonition.
total linguistic
Aim for
congruence,
total
shall we?
linguistic congruence, your words, entirely indistinguishable from doctrine. The controlled reading
Text.
window narrows
The
your
only
incoming
permissible
information to a
lens through
curated,
which to
predictable
view the
stream, the
world.
outside world reduced to approved
Proofreading
fragments. The information control matrix documents what you're allowed to know and what will be kept away from you. The controlled information diet makes the outside world feel distant. Formerly familiar facts begin to fray at the edges. You prepare to perform your inner life on the group's terms, a solo exercise in speaking only sanctioned language. Under
And I
inspection,
acknowledge
you
my
force your
inherent
voice
flaws.
into sanctioned phrases, feeling the
Daily.
unnatural discipline of speaking someone else's script.
Good.
A faint red mark
Internalized
on your
discipline
wrist
is essential
reveals
for the
how
next
private
phase.
reflex has been converted into mechanical discipline. Your underlined vocabulary list becomes a new script you compulsively rehearse until it begins to sound like your own. A throat clear from a monitor snaps you back into the sanctioned language social correction, sharpened into habit. The facilitator frames conformity as aspiration. Align your words, and you will align your life. Every approved exposure is logged and validated. The system keeps a record of what has been permitted into your mind. Your personal memories begin to blur under the weight of curated information and repeated narrative correction.
I
A
admit
doctrine
my
keeper
deviance.
teaches you to
I
reframe
embrace
your
the
past
doctrine.
with prefabricated admissions,
Repeat
distancing
with
you from your
conviction.
original experience. The thought-stopping reflex now engages even in privacy, a conditioned interruption that keeps personal reflection at bay. You rehearse your assigned
Purpose,
lines, feeling
compliance,
each recitation
unity,
smooth out the
purpose,
rough edges of your
compliance.
original voice. A linguistic
Affirm.
review registers how
Speech
much your
pattern
natural
nominal.
speech has been sanded down
Doctrine
to
compliance,
doctrine-approved
uniform.
flatness. A quiet mark on a checklist signals that your speech still needs further alignment with the group's standards. A friendly
phrasing is
correction
outdated.
reframes your phrase as
Please
outdated.
reframe.
The group's language slowly replaces yours in everyday use. You smooth the worn cue card, a small act that traces a history of private discipline. Your inner voice increasingly autocorrects to the group's lexicon, a quiet, relentless capture of language and thought.
I understand this is
Stage
difficult,
3,
but we need to move forward. The
confession
sooner you are
and
honest with us,
guilt
the sooner we can begin the recovery
elicitation.
phase.
The booth is intentionally austere. A spotlight on a blank transcript, the shadow of a monitor waiting to turn your words into record. The transcript reduces complexity into boxes, timestamp, signature, and a menu of approved admissions designed to be repeatable and irrefutable. Guided by
I confirm the
tier
admissions
prompts,
in Tier
you
1
begin the
and Tier
ritual
2.
your private recollection
My testimony
filtered
aligns
through
with
a
the inventory
procedural
protocol.
script. When your words stray, the monitor corrects you, insisting on precise, approved phrasing until your speech matches the template. You struggle to make your confession
know.
fit the offered vocabulary, the booth compressing uncertainty into scripted
Proceed.
admission. Your hesitant script fills the gaps beside their printed phrases, private hesitation pressed into public record. The monitor insists your signature make the confession official, turning fragile words into an instrument of record. The signature feels like a seal on something that no longer entirely belongs to you, an irreversible mark of compliance. A stamped timestamp locks your words to a moment of record that can be replayed and used against you. An ego-stripping checklist reframes personal history as a to-do list and transforms vulnerability into administrative compliance. You're asked to measure yourself against an invented ideal, and the differences are cataloged as moral failing. Subtle prods
realize
steer
now that
you
my
toward
behavior has been
deeper
disruptive.
admissions, the group's
I'm ready to
curiosity
talk about what
dressed up
happened
as
yesterday.
concern. A marked guilt inventory
Tier 1
graphically
is
shows
complete. Now
advancement
move to Tier 2
completion
immediately.
becomes the
We
ticket
don't
to
have all
more
day.
invasive demands. Any omission is reframed as evidence of deeper culpability, an invitation to confess further. Under sharper public scrutiny, the pressure to comply ratchets up. Your admissions are now performance. Red ink edits arrive like amendments to your memory. Precise phrases added, intended to tighten the narrative around what you must admit. Those red ink edits prescribe language you didn't use. Retrofitted confessions pressed into the record. Tier high demands dig deeper. The bar for acceptable silence has moved, and your disclosures must follow.
Sign
The
here.
request to sign new red
And here.
edits is framed as proof
This
of
is the
honesty,
truth as we
a
understand
ritual
it,
meant to
and
finalize
it is what you
the
will
revised
attest to.
account. Hesitation elicits a subtle but unmistakable tightening in the room, a social signal that isolation is the likely consequence of refusal. The group's collective gaze turns into a kind of social force, late-stage coercion that makes non-compliance costly. An empty chair
I am ready
waits
to begin
as a
my
visual threat,
self-criticism.
a clear
I
demonstration
have
of the
deviated from the
isolation that
authorized
follows
parameters.
dissent. A gesture toward the locked door underscores the reality of exit barriers, both bureaucratic and psychological. Signing the final red ink lines feels like surrender. Your private story is now bound to an institutional record. Each checked box on the ego-stripping list is another worn piece of your old self, cataloged and relabeled. The completed checklist reads like a new identity, created line by line with instructed self-disclosures. A silent
We need you
nod
to
from the
comply fully with
facilitator
the
signals
process.
that your surrendered
Your cooperation
admissions have
is
moved
mandatory.
you into a more controlled phase. The steady attention of enforcers keeps the environment of pressure intact, a reminder that submission is continually monitored. You confront the signed transcript again, a time-stamped script that now shapes how others will recall you. Rows of stamped transcripts make it clear personal histories have been converted into institutional assets. You sit with that dissonance private memory
Take a seat on the stool,
against
subject.
the group's
Let's begin the
documented
review.
truth. A memory narrative template arrives, a tool designed not just to record, but to reshape how you remember. The room is reconfigured for reconstruction, the next phase where your past will be actively remolded. A face-down transcript suggests completion, but also concealment, a record waiting to be repurposed.
Stage 4 is critical.
4.
You must allow the
Memory
process to work.
manipulation
Your
and
memories are being
identity
adjusted for your
erosion.
benefit.
Under focused light, you confront a blank template, a prescribed outline for reconstructing your own past.
Look at the before
facilitator
section.
walks you through
This narrative is
before,
inconsistent.
after framing,
We
showing
need you to
how
focus on the
recast
after
events
state and
so they
align your
fit the
memory
approved
accordingly.
narrative. The template's forced concreteness fields demand particulars where your memory once held nuance and architecture for manufactured certainty.
It was
You're
dark.
coached to
I remember
retell
the clock
a
on the
memory
wall.
using
He was
only
crying,
approved
holding the
vocabulary.
bear.
The act
I
of
couldn't help
remembering
him.
becomes
I
a
couldn't do
rehearsed
anything.
script. A doctrine overload schedule crowds your days and fractures sleep logistical pressure designed to erode resistance. Forced to supply
don't know what
precise
to
dates
write.
and names, your account becomes less like memory and more like a fabricated record. Red ink
This is
corrections
unacceptable.
arrive to
It
tidy
does not
up your
align with
account
the provided
ambiguity,
facts.
replaced
You
with
will
the
rewrite
group's
it.
definitive wording. Red ink overwrites your handwriting, a visible erasure where the group's phrasing takes precedence. Seeing your past rewritten in red, the certainty of your own memories begins to leak away. By copying the edited narrative, you help remake your memory repetition, functioning as replacement. New entries overwrite the tentative traces of your real recollection, the page becoming a palimpsest of imposed truth. Hearing
Unity
others
is
recite
strength.
their new
Truth is
histories
singular.
normalizes
My
the
narrative
process.
is
Public
revised and aligned
recitation
with the group.
cements the
We are
revised
one
past.
voice.
A doctrine
We
overload
must
lecture
achieve
layers dense
maximum
material
absorption
over
at a
exhausted
relentless
minds,
pace.
information saturation
Forget
as
your
a tool
previous
for
notions.
compliance. The matrix enumerates who and what is allowed into your mind, each entry a gatekeeper for what you may believe. You wrestle privately with intensifying memory, doubt the edited narrative pressing against your own, making recollection feel unmoored. The facilitator's red ink edits claim authority over your memory, a systematic thinning of your original account. The page becomes saturated with red corrections, a visual record of the doctrine's replacement of personal history. Group affirmation
understand
turns
that my
the
thoughts were
revised narrative
incorrect.
into social
I
fact.
must align
recitation
with the
becomes
group's
the
shared
engine
purpose.
of internalization.
I will observe.
Tired faces and yawns betray the toll of designed sleep disruption, a physiological companion to memory erosion. A practiced line from the cue card begins to nestle into your inner voice, private thought rephrased as doctrine. In daily checks,
I
you
affirm
rehearse
that my
the
memory
revised
is aligned
story
with the
while being
required
appraised
narrative.
for authenticity.
I understand that
performance
yesterday's
as proof of
recollection
internal
was
change.
flawed.
The directive is clear
This
and
concludes your review.
uncompromising.
These are the
Live
approved
the
narratives.
revised narrative
There will be no
as your
further
truth.
discussion.
A stack of approved templates stands ready, collective evidence of the group's successful narrative overhaul. Your reflection
nothing to
feels
be alarmed
subtly
about,
foreign
subject.
identity
This is
erosion
you.
visible not just
Focus
in words,
on the details.
but in posture and expression. An isolated peer's unchecked inventory is a living cautionary tale. Incomplete conformity brings social separation. The worn cue card traces a history of habitual control, a pocket-sized instrument of internal policing. A quiet resignation descends as you hold the self-revelation log, acceptance of a new, imposed identity taking shape. The facilitator closes the chapter with a single, absolute injunction. Your narrative is complete. Embody it. The signed, approved template stands as formal evidence that your past has been officially rewritten. Stage 5. Exit and recovery.
The
An
exit
attempt
record is a
triggers
formality.
the presentation of
It will
exit
follow
barrier
you.
documentation, the system's record that follows you even after you leave.
I confess to my transgressions against the community. I know my thoughts were impure, but I accept the shame I have brought upon myself.
A recovery counselor
original
lays out a
memories are
memory
here in
reintegration protocol, a
We
deliberate
need to
effort
focus on the
to
revised
disentangle
narrative
your
templates.
true recollection
Template
from the
1,
doctored
the
narrative.
consensus view.
Old guilt anchor phrases still rise, unbidden proof that the group's language has lodged itself deep in your speech. Recovery begins by laying your signed transcripts beside your own journaled memories, a direct, often painful comparison.
If you look
You
at this here, this
methodically
wasn't an
unpack
admission of
the
guilt, but a
inventory
manipulation.
Even though
to
I checked this box
understand how
myself.
Yes,
admissions were
recognizing that as
weaponized
part of the
against your
recovery
autonomy.
process.
You practice doubt restoration, choosing a blank notebook over the cue card, deliberately recreating space for unprogrammed thought. You search for sensory anchors to reconstruct memories
inside.
the templates flattened.
The
Smells,
red ball.
Images, textures that
blue?
belong only to you. The
We need to
counselor
break down
explains
these habit loops
psychological
and understand
dependency,
how social
visually
enforcement
mapping how
created
habits,
this dependency.
social pressure,
That's
and
the key to
documentation
addressing the
continue to
tension
shape
you're
choices.
feeling.
Stacks of signed transcripts linger as potential evidence. Others might use a persistent exit barrier even after you have gone. Residue from
about what happened
information
yesterday.
control lingers a pause when a
wait.
forbidden topic surfaces.
Are we sure we should talk about
evidence
this here?
that the restriction
I don't know,
lives
it feels
on in
risky.
habit. Seeing former enforcers in public brings an old social pressure back into the present, proof that surveillance can outlast the institution. Progress is visible, but key items remain undone. Recovery is incremental and incomplete. You notice physical residues of identity, erosion, posture, and expression that still echo the group's influence.
There's
a
no
blank
pressure,
self-revelation log
but
is
starting to
offered
write
as an
can be a
invitation.
powerful
Start
step
writing
toward
your
reclaiming
unedited
your
thoughts
voice.
into a space that is yours again. Comparing your old photograph with a current one reveals how deeply the group has altered your outward bearing and inner life. Fragmented memories resist full reconstruction. Outside narratives still cut through the scenes you're trying to reclaim. Loved ones gently point out recurring loaded vocabulary, a reminder that language recovery takes
You
time
used that
and
word a few
outside
times.
sparks. The signed confession packet remains in circulation, a legal and social artifact that can be invoked long after you've left.
Take a deep
catalog
breath.
mismatches
Which
between
document
the
would you
official
like to discuss
transcript and
first?
your own narrative,
The confession
a deliberate
packet.
exercise in
I
reclaiming
still don't understand
authorship
why I
over
wrote
your
that.
past. The guilt inventory shows how omissions were weaponized into public penance, an engineered pathway from private error to public spectacle. A small
thought I was
decision
handling it,
becomes
but
heavy with hesitation, the
I don't know.
residue of psychological
You don't have to handle it
dependency
alone.
shaping
We'll figure it
everyday
out.
choices. A near
didn't mean to
slip
do
of
it, I
loaded
swear.
vocabulary
It was an
jolts you
accident.
evidence that the
And I
guilt
just panicked
anchor
when I
still
saw the-
pulls at your speech. The signed confession packet endures a quiet, permanent obstacle to a fully unencumbered future.